Hello, and a big warm welcome to the Guardian Doula's Diary podcast. My name is Angela Deuce, or Angie. I'm your host and the founder of Guardian Doula. I'm a certified birth and postpartum doula and childbirth educator based on Sydney's Northern Beaches and serving women and their families all throughout Sydney. This podcast is an honest collection of the stories and experiences of birthing women and the professionals that support them to empower, equip, and inspire us all. Let's get into it. Hello, happy Monday. Welcome to another episode. Let's see how we go today. I am currently sitting on my bed, cuddling my little baby who has a fever. You might hear her snoring away with her little blocked nose. She's picked up some kind of a cold or a virus, but I wanted to still get today's episode up. I'm just doing it with a baby in my arms, which is actually very beautiful. I quite like having a little cuddly guest while I'm doing this. So I am sorry if you can hear lots of snoring and sniffling. That would be little baby Rin making her appearance. But today I wanted to talk about a topic that I get asked about quite often from my clients, and then also just people in general when they hear that I'm a doula. I feel like this is a question that I get asked quite a lot. And the question is, how do you help people to avoid unwarranted or unnecessary interventions when it comes to labor and birth? And I've got a few tips, and I'm going to unpack each of them today so that you've got some really good practical advice that you can kind of consider, and you can have a think about how you might implement some of these things or all of these things. So I'll just give you a quick overview of my kind of main pieces of advice, and then I'll unpack each of the pieces of advice individually. So number one, you need to understand the cascade of intervention. Number two, you need to know how to ask the right questions. Number three, you need to be really mindful of your birth team. Number four, you need to know your rights and your options. Number five, set your environment up really well. And number six, prepare your mind and your body. Oh, and of course, also number seven, super important one, is that you need to have the right information. You've got to be really informed. So I will unpack each of those, starting with number one, the importance of understanding the cascade of intervention. Now, I do actually have a separate episode all about the cascade of intervention. So I do recommend go back and listen to that if you haven't already. It's a really good kind of overview that will help you to understand what this cascade is, which I think is really important. I always love the analogy of, if you were like an MMA fighter and you had a big fight coming up and you wanted to prepare and really set yourself up to win, you would go and do everything you can to understand your opponent, right? And if they are notorious for certain moves or maneuvers or whatever you would call it, then you would kind of strategize and put things in place in your training regime to prepare for that fight, depending on what you have kind of coming. So in the same way, I feel like understanding the cascade of intervention is a really helpful first step in avoiding it. So definitely go and listen to that episode. It's episode 13. So you can go and find that and kind of start there. But the next thing that I would say, and I want this to be almost like a little bit of a disclaimer for the episode, which again, I literally hate disclaimers because I feel like it should just be common sense, but I'll just say it anyway. Obviously, not all interventions are bad. And so I'm not saying here we just want to run away from as many as we can. It's just about being intentional and being well informed so that you kind of are only doing or accepting the interventions that are really genuinely going to serve you and or your baby. So that's the kind of foundation for this episode. But number two, and I think this is a good little bridge because, wanting to avoid unnecessary intervention begs the question how do I know if an intervention is necessary? Obviously medical intervention saves lives sometimes, so it's not always unnecessary. Sometimes you really do need these things. But the question is like, how do I know when it's time to accept something, and how do I know which intervention I should accept, or how do I kind of navigate that? And so this comes to my second piece of advice, which is knowing the questions to ask. So something that I really like to teach my clients is to use the brains tool. And this is basically a framework to help you ask the right questions so that you are making sure that you're getting really well-rounded information about any intervention. So the B stands for benefits, the R is for risks, the A is alternatives, I is intuition, N is nothing, and S is statistics. So it's quite self-explanatory. You would say, B for benefits, what are the benefits of this intervention for me and my baby? What are the risks of this intervention? And I always say, when you are asking about the risks of something, it is so crucial to ask for like numerical values, not just like, oh, there's a risk of stillbirth if we don't induce you beyond, X many weeks. Because I think, like, just as an example, a very, very common thing that care providers will throw out there is how the stillbirth risk doubles each week at the end of pregnancy. And that is true, but it's almost like they're telling you a half truth, because if they don't tell you what those numbers are, it's not a very clear picture of the risk. So they're telling you that risk is there, but you don't know what the risk is. And I'm definitely butchering this. These are not the exact numbers, but it's something like, at maybe 38 weeks, it goes from like a 0.002% chance to then at 39 weeks, a 0.004% chance, or whatever the specifics are. But, so yes, it's true that the risk doubles, but it is still below 0.5%. And so I think it's just important to make sure that you are being given proper, accurate numbers as to what the risks are, because obviously any mother, if you say the S word, being stillbirth, she's going to have a heart attack when she hears that. And so I think it's important that you're given proper information, not just like, oh, there's a risk of stillbirth. Like, what actually is that risk is really important to understand. And so then A for alternatives, I would be asking, like, what alternative options do I have that are more conducive to the birth that I want? So, let's say we're talking about induction because the care provider's like, oh, there's this risk of stillbirth that doubles, let's induce you. Well, if you're really keen on having a physiological natural birth, obviously induction is something that, unless it's very essential, and there's like a serious medical complication happening that would indicate a need for induction, that's something that you want to avoid, because we know that being induced significantly increases the chances that you'll end up having a cesarean. And so something like that is likely to drastically affect the trajectory of your birth. And so it's important to ask about what alternatives there are available to you that are more conducive to the outcome that you are hoping to have and that you're working towards. Intuition, I for intuition. So this is a huge one too. Like, I would be really leaning into your gut. If you are, let's say you're in labor, you're in the hospital, laboring, everything's going beautifully. And then, a doctor comes in and says, hey, we really want to speed this up. We think we need to kind of, speed it up. So we're going to recommend that you have some syntocinon to do that, which is like the medication that they give you to induce labor, and they can also give it to you to speed up labor. If something in your gut is telling you, like, I just think this guy just wants to go on his lunch break, or he doesn't want to work a late night or whatever, then lean into that intuition and ask for a second opinion, or, dig a little bit deeper and nut out like what really is going on there. Because if something in your gut is telling you that something's not right, you're probably picking up on something that is legitimate. So don't disregard your gut instinct. I think intuition is huge. And then N stands for nothing. So asking around, what would it look like to do nothing? What would it look like to wait and see for the moment? I think is huge. And then S is for statistics. So are there any statistics that I can use to help me make a decision on this? So again, for example, that one that I said before about how being induced increases the likelihood that you will end up having a cesarean. Like, if you had some stats around that, you may then use those statistics to help you to decide. I think in life, it's all about weighing up your options and almost like picking your risks or picking your hard, because there's risk to everything. Like, there's risk if you walk out your front door, a brick might fall on your head from the story above you, you don't know. There's risk to everything. And although it's unlikely that you're going to have a brick fall on your head when you walk out your front door. It is not impossible. There's a small risk of that. And so I think, having the right questions to ask, it's really, really important. And I would even role play this, particularly towards the end of your pregnancy, where it is very, very likely that you will be pressured to have an induction. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. That's just a fact. It is likely that you will be pressured into an induction at the end of your pregnancy. The rate of induction at the moment is like 40% in Australia. So almost half of all mothers are being induced. Like, that is very, very significant. That's not me trying to scare you or, do like any fear mongering. It's just that the reality is that there is pressure around the end of pregnancy to have an induction. And I see it week in, week out with my clients. That's just what it is. And so you need to be prepared to navigate those conversations. And I mean, I think this kind of brings me to my next point, which is choosing your birth team really carefully. Oh my gosh, this probably is one of the biggest, if not the biggest point of this entire podcast. If you don't take anything else away from this, just hear me out on point 3, which is to be very, very mindful and very intentional about your birth team. So this is talking about your model of care, and this is also talking about whether or not you hire a doula. There's another episode that I posted around the things that you can control about giving birth. I think so often we hear like, oh, you can't control anything about birth. It's all out of our hands. That is rubbish. Yes, there is part of birth that is out of our control, but it's also true that there are very, very significant things that you can control that will then make a big difference to the likely, that trajectory of your birth. And choosing a model of care that makes sense for what your goal is a huge part of that. So I always say, if you are a healthy woman having a healthy pregnancy and you want to have a natural birth, there is absolutely no need for you to be in an obstetrician-led model of care. It makes no sense. An obstetrician is trained to manage high-risk situations. They are surgeons, essentially, trained to do cesarean sections. And so if you are a healthy woman who happens to be pregnant and you want to have a natural birth experience, then an obstetrician is probably the worst thing you could possibly do. The research says that a midwifery-led model of care makes so much more sense for healthy women, or for women who are having relatively low-risk pregnancies, or even if you are in a higher-risk pregnancy, have the continuity of midwifery-led care, but then add in the obstetrician input if you need it. But certainly having that midwifery lens is so important and is so helpful if you do hope to have a natural birth experience. That's what the research says. That's not my opinion. It certainly is my experience, but it is also what the research shows. So I think that's a huge one. And then also hiring a doula is such a no-brainer. Having a doula on your team is not only proven by the research to decrease medical intervention overall, and there are so many other benefits that I could harp on about. But I mean, I don't want to take up too much of the time talking about the role of a doula on this episode, but I have to mention it because it is such an essential part of this conversation around avoiding interventions that were not actually needed. Having someone who is hired by you and is not working for the hospital or the midwife or whoever, that is priceless, because you're being given unbiased support and unbiased information, and that just seriously goes so far when it comes to birth. So I seriously cannot emphasize that one enough. I think making sure that you've got every single person on your birth team really well thought out, and that you're very intentional to do that right. Really don't skimp when it comes to your birth team. I think that is the most important one of this entire list. Hire a doula, make sure that you've got a care provider that really fits your goals. And I always say to women, honestly, think about the birth that you want, start there, and then work backwards. So if your dream birth is an elective cesarean, cool, go and hire an obstetrician, that's what they serve. It's like you wouldn't go to McDonald's. I posted this recently on my Instagram. You're not going to go to McDonald's if you're looking for a healthy meal. Yes, you can probably order a salad there, but that's not their specialty, and it's the same thing. Obstetricians, yes, vaginal births do happen in obstetrician-led models of care, but the majority of what they do is not physiological vaginal birth. Like, that's not their specialty. That's not what they serve. You're in the wrong restaurant if that's what you want to order. So I think, yeah, that's huge. The fourth thing that I think is really, really important to wrap your head around is knowing your rights and knowing your options. There's a saying that I love that says, like, if you don't know your options, then you don't have any options. And that honestly could not be more true when it comes to birth. So, it's important to know, like, you can decline anything. You do not have to say yes to anything at all. There is no scan, there is no test, there is no vaginal exam, there is no procedure, there is no policy at all that you have to say yes to. I think, something that kind of grinds my gears, I hear it all the time, and I hear it from mums and healthcare providers, is just language like, I had to be induced because blah, blah, blah. Or, the women have to get their scans at such and such gestation. Like, no one has to do anything. Everything is your choice. Every single test, every screening, every intervention, everything is up to you. You don't have to do anything. And I think knowing that you actually have that right to decline is huge. A really cool story about this is I had a client who was really keen on having a physiological VBAC. We had gone into the hospital, everything was going beautifully, and then the OB really wanted to do continuous monitoring, continuous CTG monitoring. But basically, continuous CTG monitoring is not even associated with lower rates of maternal and infant deaths, but it is associated with higher rates of cesarean section and like other interventions. And so again, like, me just saying that is not enough research. You've got to go and take a proper deep dive. But this mum had done all of her research. I had sent her lots of information. And so she decided that for her, the continuous CTG was not something that she felt was necessary or that she wanted to accept in labor. And, the fact that she even knew that she had a choice around that was so important, because then when, the recommendation was made, she could be like, that's not something that I'm comfortable with. Thank you so much. If the intermittent Doppler monitoring, shows any thing that is like outside of normal or safe or healthy, at that point, I'm willing to have a conversation about CTG monitoring. But like, as of right now, that's not my preference. And so knowing that she even had the option to have the Doppler monitoring intermittently, which is where the midwife holds the little thing to your tummy every 15 minutes or so to check the baby's heart rate and to kind of watch, like, is it recovering after contractions? What's the pattern? What's the baby's baseline? Are we seeing any changes in the baby's baseline? Knowing that she even had that option was huge, right? Like, I think it's so important to know what your options are. Otherwise, again, you don't have any if you don't know the options. Number 5 is to set yourself up with a supportive birth environment. Now, because birth is so hormonal, things like bright lights, interruptions, constantly being monitored, constantly being assessed, those things can really slow labor down. And so creating an environment that you feel very comfortable in, where you feel safe, is so crucial. So this might be, obviously, again, make sure you have a doula. Like, I cannot emphasize this enough. A doula will literally protect your birth space so much more than I can describe on a podcast episode. But so have the doula, use headphones, dim the lights, use an eye mask, put your music on, like, protect that space. It is so important, because when you're in labor, so I mentioned that it's really hormonal, right? Oxytocin is the hormone that is responsible for starting labor and then causing labor to progress. And so oxytocin being this like happy hormone, your safe hormone, your love hormone, we need to be really optimizing your body's oxytocin production in order to facilitate a smooth labor. And so supporting yourself with a really beautiful environment that is conducive to that is huge. Number 6 is prepare your mind and your body. So, number 1, mindset is so huge. When it comes to birth, confidence is key, right? And it is very normal that women will have crisis moments where, like, their confidence kind of dips and they feel like they can't do it anymore. Again, the crucial crunch point of when you need a doula to bring you out of those crisis of confidence moments. But, it's so much of birth is about trusting the process of birth and being confident that you can do it, so that you can then just like get out of the way and let your body do its thing, right? Like that is huge. But I think too, a really helpful thing is also preparing your body. And so I work with my clients to do a lot of like OMP, which stands for optimal maternal positioning stretches towards the end of their pregnancy. They are practicing their stretches. I encourage them to do the stretches like every day. There's protocols that I give them to practice, so that if we need to bring them out in labor, let's say labor is stalling or the baby's not in a great position, and we're I'm always watching for different signs that would tell me that baby may not be in a super favorable position. If I start to notice that and we need to pull out our OMP protocols and our tricks and stretches and positions and all of our tools in our tool belt, and if they have practiced and prepared their bodies and they've been doing the stretches and creating really good pelvic alignment so that the baby has as much space as possible to navigate the pelvis, like all of these things work really beautifully to help us on the day. And even, diet is huge as well, like making sure that we're really fueling our bodies with good quality nourishing foods, that we're keeping inflammation low in our bodies. Like these things all work together in a really beautiful recipe for success, and I kind of don't like using the word success in birth because I feel like it's kind of like a loaded word, but all of these things can really work together to give you a really great shot at avoiding interventions, that could have been avoided. Oh, and of course also number 7, super important one, is that you need to have the right information. You've got to be really informed. I think definitely when it comes to birth, knowledge is power. And so just making sure that you are going into birth really, really well informed is super important and is going to be a very significant part of this whole process. Something that I'm very big on with my clients is giving them really good quality information. And so throughout the pregnancy, I will be sending them different, resources, like as things come up, or as even this week, just as 2 random examples. I had a client let me know that she has recently had a scan, and the scan showed that she's got a low-lying placenta. And so, that just basically means that the placenta is right near her cervix. It's in the bottom half of her uterus. And so with a low-lying placenta, there's concern that if it is too close to the cervix or if it's covering the cervix, you may have like a cesarean recommended. But I was sending her all this information on it because really it is very, very likely, in fact, there's a 99% chance that a low-lying placenta will resolve on its own. And so I sent her lots of information around that just to ease her mind and give her, just kind of arm her with that knowledge. And then another example was also this week, I had another client who was offered an induction because her baby's size was like not within sort of the average range. And that's okay. She may choose to go ahead with the induction, but I sent her some information around the accuracy of the ultrasounds. I sent her information on the risks and benefits of induction, sent her information on big babies and small babies. And, all of this stuff I think is so crucial because it helps you to come to a place where you feel very confident and very across all of your things that are going on. I think knowing the ins and outs of your unique situation and like really understanding the risks and the benefits of all of your different options, like it's so important. It's so, so important. And I think really taking responsibility in your pregnancy is so crucial. Like I know a lot of people are like, I'm just gonna wing it, ha ha ha. Like, no, you're about to become a parent. Like you can't wing it. Like this little baby's counting on you. I feel like you've got to like not put like a silly amount of pressure on yourself, but also like, you've got to take responsibility. Like your birth affects you, but it also affects someone else, and that someone else is your baby. And so I think, putting the work in and like getting really informed is a really important part of having a birth that you feel very happy about and satisfied with, and, a positive, empowering experience. But also like from a safety perspective, like you want to definitely be taking this seriously. And, because it is serious, like your birth is a really sacred, precious, significant experience. And anyway, I don't want to kind of go on a tangent about how worthwhile it is to invest in your birth and to really like prioritize making it as good as it can be and doing all the things that you can do. But yeah, I think information is an absolutely huge part of this. And a lot of people think they're super informed and they're just not, which is really hard. Like, that's a really tough pill to swallow. I hear it all the time after people have their first baby. They'll hire me for the second one and be like, far out, we thought we were so informed. We thought we were so well prepared, so well researched. And then we got there and we realized we didn't know what we were doing. And we don't want to feel like that again. So we're hiring a doula who is going to walk us through and be that extra layer of support, that extra layer of, information and resources and blah, blah, blah. So I think, being informed is a very, very significant piece of this puzzle. And so I think to kind of close off, I would say that, your body knows what to do. Birth doesn't really need to be micromanaged. Like, babies just are born. This is an ancient thing that's been happening for a very long time. Women's bodies give birth to babies, right? But in today's system, unfortunately, it's not that simple as being like, oh, well, I was made to do it. Let's just like whack a birth affirmation on it. Like, the statistics are really horrific right now around birth interventions. Like I said before, the induction rate is like 40%. Cesarean rates are super high too. I think it's like 30%. There are some private hospitals that have like a 50% cesarean rate. Like, you have to be proactive. There's my little one snoring. You just need to put the right things in place. Unfortunately, natural, physiological, empowering birth doesn't just happen on its own at the moment. And that's a really unfortunate reality, but it is a reality. And so I think, you can either kind of sit around and complain and be sad that it takes work and intention and the right things being put in place, or you can accept that it takes work, intention, and the right things being set in place, and you can set yourself up by doing those things and give yourself the best possible shot. So if you are keen on having a doula, I support women all around Sydney. I tend to book out really far in advance, but sometimes I'll have babies that are born early, and so then I have availability that kind of comes up later in the piece. So even if you are towards the end of your pregnancy and you're like, oh my gosh, like maybe I've left it too late, maybe you haven't. So I encourage you, like, get in touch earlier than later, but don't rule yourself out. Always ask the question, even if you think maybe it's too late. But yeah, I think put all the things in place, book a consult call if you're keen to explore doula support with me. You can do that through my website, which is guardiandoula.com.au. And yeah, I wish you all the best, and remember to use the brains thing to ask the right questions. Remember that everything is an option. You've got choices, you've got rights. You don't need to say yes to everything. You don't need to say yes to anything. This is your journey. This is your birth, and you get to own it, sister. I hope those were helpful tips, and I'll see you here soon. Thanks for joining us for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please leave a rating or a comment, and I can't wait to see you back here for the next one.